Hi there, welcome to Newsnight. I'm Ladi Akeridoluale. Thanks for joining us. Security, or the lack of it, is still squarely front and center of national discussions. With kidnappings, including of skilled children, and the continued crisis involving farmers and herders going on in various parts of the country. The search for viable solutions is also hotted up. The federal government is at the forefront of all this, but it also involves governors, the National Assembly, traditional as well as religious leaders. What exactly is happening, and what positions will eventually be taken to tackle the various facets of this challenge? Newsnight talks to the Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed. Honorable Minister, thank you for this opportunity. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for inviting me to your program.
We're at a crossroads, it does appear, as a country, so I'm going to start with the most pressing issue, which is that of security. What does the federal government make of the current security situation in the country? Before we even discuss the specifics, overall, an overview, what do you make of the state of Nigeria's security?
Well, we have challenges, and the government is rising stoutly to challenges. But probably it will help Nigerians also to try and understand what brought us to this sorry pass. Because until you know the cause of your problems, you will not be able to address such problems. And most people comment about the security challenges in Nigeria, be it insurgency, be it kidnapping, be it banditry, fail to understand the underlying factors. When we address those issues, we will not get out of the woods. And that's precisely what the federal government is doing. Ask anybody today, it will tell you that the most serious challenge we have is herdsmen and farmers clashes. It will tell you it's Fulani versus other ethnic groups, but they don't take the rigor to understand how we got there. And it's very important. See, what we must first admit that the various ethnic groups in Nigeria had been living together for a very long time. And they've been having challenges also, but they've been able to resolve these challenges amicably. What we've witnessed in the last couple of years is a lot of intolerance, a lot of politicization of security issues, a reluctance to understand and address, at least in discuss, the background to these issues. And I'll start with the issue of herdsmen-farmers clashes. Now, over the years, there has always been established two migratory type of, operations. The first is when the Fulani or the herdsmen, during dry season, they will move from the north to the south in search of greener pasture. And in the rainy season, they move back to the north. And frankly speaking, there's always been little or no friction during those migratory, periods. On the contrary, it's always been, mutually beneficial for all the parties. The cattle will get fodder in the south. In the process, they will also drop manure, manure to enrich the farmers' land. At times, they also eat up all the straws, and there was laid down procedures as to if a stray cattle should destroy a farm, there were ways of compensating the farmer, and that went on for many years. The second migratory example is the more difficult one, which we call pastoralism. Here is when you have herdsmen who will move anywhere, anytime, to look for where there's, water, where there's, grazing ground. Now, that again is a bit more difficult one because it brings into more contact and more frequent conflict between the parties. However, we've also failed to address certain issues in the last couple of years that have made what used to be an extremely mutually beneficial, beneficial relationship that's now become, quite unpleasant, quite unfriendly. Now, the first is that what we are witnessing today, largely, is as a result of a scramble for resources. What are these resources? Water, grazing land. This is the basic problem. About 50 years ago, the Lake Chad, which used to, and this Lake Chad, 50 years ago, about 7 countries, with a population of about almost 20 million people, used to depend solely on the Lake Chad for their agriculture, for their irrigation, for their water. That is Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, Central African Republic, all of us, all of them, that area. The Lake Chad provided enough water and enough, grazing land for the cattle, for farming, for irrigation. But over the years, about 90% of the water of the Lake Chad has been lost to climate change. So what we have today is, over time, those, nomads who used to be sedentary and who used to, graze, their cattle around the Lake Chad are now beginning to move southward. And that's one of the beginning of the conflicts. 2 is urbanization. 50 years ago, there were recognized grazing reserves. There were recognized cattle routes. Today, what do we have? We have the whole place built up. When I was young, we used to have Makwari Ranch, all this, that. Over 400 all over Nigeria. Today, urbanization, they've been built up. So again, you can see why you're going to have more conflict between herdsmen and farmers. And then the wars around us, not helped. Starting from Mali to Chad to Niger, to Cameroon to Chad. We've all witnessed, starting from Libya, we've all witnessed one form of disturbance or the other. And this has made easy the proliferation of small arms and guns, which has really fired or fueled these farmer-herdsmen clashes. On top of that is the ECOWAS protocol, which allows for transhumance. It allows for me to bring my cattle from Senegal to Nigeria through all these countries. And the process, you're talking about herdsmen, were not used to the mores and the values of the local people. Now, those are all issues that we need to address, and the government is busy addressing those issues. However, and I want to make this clear, you see, Nigerians, we must not let emotion overtake our better sense of judgment. The answer to farmer-herdsmen clashes is not giving ultimatums to one group to leave one part of the country. No, it won't work. The answer is that if you live with us and we are tolerant to receive you, you must also respect our ways of life, respect our culture, respect our mores. And this is what used to happen before. When did it break down? It broke down when we started criminalizing ethnic identity. It broke down when politicians started taking advantage of issues and trying to introduce politics, ethnicity, and even religion into what is largely a security matter. And you see, when you look at what happened recently in Shasha,
yes,
it has nothing to do with ethnicity or religion. What happened from every account was that somebody from Niger Republic, was the one that was carrying tomato, and then I think ran into somebody, tomato fell down, then there's this, oh, wash it, don't wash it. Then one person slapped the other, that one fainted, went to the hospital, he said was dead, and then one ethnic group, then the other said, oh, they've killed Yoruba man, they've killed Hausa man. This Shasha market has been on for how many years? So our advice is that our state governments should ensure there is harmony, tolerance among the various groups that live in their domain. And I'm glad that what I've been witnessing of the governors of the Southwest meeting with Mietiala, meeting with the militant and with the militia groups, and meeting with traditional religious leaders, and people going around to preach unity is the answer. In addition to what government is doing to arrest climate change, Mr. President has been at the forefront of trying to refill the Chad Basin from the River Congo. And he has been championing this through AU, through EU, through G8. Now, that is very, very important. But we must also understand that there's a need to move from what used to be the traditional animal husbandry. We need to move from there to modern animal husbandry, where ranches, grazing reserves will be the norm. But in doing so, and this is what the federal government has embarked upon through the livestock transformation scheme. But you see, you need to also understand that you cannot just go from 0 to 100. You must look at the cultural imperatives also. Among the Fulanis, your wealth, your importance in society is determined by the number of cattle heads you have, not by how fat they are. So if I have 100 cows, I'm superior to you with 50. It's relevant whether your 50 cows will fetch more money at the abattoir than mine. It's relevant whether your 50 cows will produce more milk than mine. I'm still your superior. So you need that advocacy also to educate and carry along our people. Look, that everywhere in the world, herdsmen are the same. They're nomadic, whether in Norway, whether in Finland. But over time, they've adopted the modern technology for animal husbandry. Otherwise, you can't. You see, the every Fulani man who is nomadic, it's his way of life. You must convince him that, look, if your cow travels from Lagos, from Kano to Lagos, by the time it gets to Lagos, it's emaciated. It has lost so much weight. Whereas a cow that is sedentary on a ranch weighs 5 times, 10 times more than the cow on the run. It produces more milk. So these are all the issues, and when people are making commentary we should be very careful about stereotyping or profiling. Oh, this government supports dealing with all criminals, whether they are Fulanis, whether they are Hausa, whether they are Yorubas. But we must be careful of profiling. Must be careful of ethnic, profiling and ethnic characterization, and saying that, oh, if something happens here, it must be this. It must be these people. And like I said again, we have many. You see, in Nigeria, in Nigeria, we have largely Fulanis and a few Tuaregs. But all over West Africa, we have Fulanis, we have Tuaregs, we have we have Tubus, and you can't, you do not actually know the difference. And a lot of criminality has also infiltrated the herdsmen farmers, conflict. A lot of criminality, people that have absolutely no business being being herdsmen, have taken the opportunity of this, situation to perpetuate, criminality. But our leaders should please work to lower the temperature and the tension. Because at the end of the day, we will live together. Nigeria has more to gain by being together than by being apart. So I think I want to give you that background to understand, what we face today. Of course, when you look at, I was discussing with a colleague of mine, and I said, look, I said, listen, you cannot introduce religion into this matter, or even ethnicity. Now, look at the bandits. Who are their victims? Their victims are their fellow Fulanis, Hausas, and they are all Muslims. Take Kebi. Even take the last incident in Kagara. The students are from where? They're from the northern part of this country. So please, bandits are bandits from where they come from. Criminals are criminals from where they come from. But please, let's stop ethnic profiling.
There's been a lot of activity, a lot of movement, as you pointed out, northern governors coming down south, the governors forum meeting, traditional rulers, all of that. I'm just wondering, because quite a number of people have made the same observation, that why did we wait until it became like this before all these interventions were made? Because it appeared as if things were going on, and then non-state actors stepped into the breach before the actual state actors started reacting.
No, that is not like that. You see, let me remind you. In our first term, 2015, 2019, the federal government, through my ministry, used to hold town hall meetings all over Nigeria. These town hall meetings were platforms to resolve these kind of problems. We'll pick a particular subject matter. It might be insecurity. We'll go to the theater. We'll go to Maiduguri, for instance, and we'll discuss all the issues about security. We went to Gusau to discuss the issue of banditry and kidnapping. And what do we do at these town hall meetings? We invite all stakeholders, depending on the nature of the subject matter. We were in Enugu, we were in Uyo, we were in Ibadan. In our first term, we held 16 town hall meetings. Second term, we were in Katsina to discuss the same banditry and insecurity. We will also discuss the issue of corruption in this town hall meeting. Unfortunately, COVID set in. And this town hall meetings provide a very good platform because it was televised live, so it could not be doctored. People spoke their minds. We took notes, and we went back home. The government took decisions. Some matters that were raised will be discussed at council meeting. These resource persons could be ministers, depending on the nature of the matter, subject matter. We are traditional rulers, we are religious leaders. I mean, the one we had in Enugu with all the bishops and everything, because we were then discussing, this issue of whether one part of the country was being developed or not. So it's not really correct to say that the government sat back. But unfortunately, see, when there's poverty, the first casualty at times is insecurity. Now, the difficulties and the hardship that COVID-19 also brought compounded issues. But more importantly, I think fake news, irresponsible politicians who encourage non-state actors are more to hold responsible. Because at the end of the day, when you find out what is the cause of what has led to so many lives, so many property, you begin, but it's not, at times, it's just a fake news. And I'll give you 2 examples. Sometimes in 2017 or thereabout, there was news that, it was a fake news, that students of Advanced Teachers College in Benewaya, in Kaduna State, that 5 Christian students had been killed. And it went viral. By the time the story was debunked, they set many houses on fire. The matter is still in court today. I remember a bishop in Kaduna said, the trouble caused, that the destruction and mayhem caused by the fake news was much more than the real problem. And then some politicians also want to take undue advantage and want to politicize security issues, forgetting that it's because there's a country called Nigeria that they can practice their craft of politics. So this is why we think what the governors are doing now is the right thing, and they must continue. But we've always done that, and we continue to do it. But you see, with COVID-19, it's not the same thing. We're going to resume our town hall meetings, but now it's going to be hybrid of physical and technology and virtual. Yes.
The politicization you mentioned, one of its results has also been the seeming regionalization of security forces or security architecture.
Yes.
So you have things like the Eastern Security Network, the Amotekun, forest guards, rangers, and all other kinds of... but we seem to get mixed messages. At a point, there's the statement that, they're supposed to be working with the police in gathering intelligence. Then at some other point, you hear that, no, these are illegal. The Constitution recognizes only the Nigerian police and the armed forces as being in charge of security. Many of these outfits have now gotten involved in the herders, farmers issue,
right,
making the situation even more complex.
Exactly.
What's the federal government going to do? Because as the final arbiter anyway, at one point in time, a decision has to be made, if not now.
You're right. And you see, I believe that security is largely a local matter. In other words, even when the Constitution gives responsibility to the federal government to secure lives and property, it cannot do it without the cooperation of the community. And this is where the government is introducing community policing. Community policing, when it's fully, when it fully materializes, we're going to take care of all these, groups. Because what does Amatekun do, for instance? Amatekun is supposed to complement what the police and the military, what they are doing. Because one thing is clear, whether it's Amatekun or the Eastern, or whether it's Amatekun or whatever, we believe that they all want to fight crime. But we have not fine-tuned this. And that is, I think, what we should be doing. There should be more interaction, more, communication, more, meetings and consultations between the police, the military, and all these groups, so that everybody will have a defined, so that we will not be working at cross purposes. But I believe it's just a bit too early in the day. But I think gradually, when the concept of community policing is fully developed, be able to, move along with all these various, what I call regional security groups. Because I want to believe, sir, that whatever the regional security group is, it wants to keep the peace. But I agree with you that we must be careful not to worsen the problem. Because once you become part of the problem as opposed to the solution, then it becomes a problem. But I believe that the IGP, the minister, will work out this arrangement between the various regional groupings, regional security forces.
From Chibok to Dapchi to Kankara and then Kagara. Now, one thing seems to run through it all, and that is that at the time of the incidents that led to students, in some cases teachers and other people being taken away, is that the security arrangement in the schools themselves, in the institutions, are not or were not existing. Let's put it that way. There was virtually no security in the institutions themselves. But it brings to mind the fact that there was supposed to be a safe school initiative that was put in place after the Chibok incident. That was to ensure that the more vulnerable identified schools that are not in townships and so on, where security forces can easily reach them, should have present security at them, since they are known now to be targets. I'm wondering, is that initiative still in place? And if so, why has it not been useful in these 4 incidents that I mentioned, amongst others?
You see, for the same reason that even in the most developed country in the world, school kidnapping takes place. Last year in the US, we also witnessed at least 3 or 4 school kidnappings. And that is probably one of the most developed countries in the world. Now, the thing about terrorism is that the terrorists don't live by your own rules. And they are especially, interested in soft targets. See, they know that what is going to get global attention is actually kidnapping school children. And we must be careful also. We can't turn all our schools into barracks. What is important to me is the intelligence gathering, surveillance, rather than the physical presence of the soldiers or policemen. But even the soldiers and policemen are there, and they find out that the lives of the children are at risk, they're not going to dare them. But the truth of the matter is that you are dealing with people who don't think like me and you. You are dealing with people who have absolutely no rules of engagement. You are dealing with people whose motivations are completely different from mine and yours. And anywhere in the world, this is how terrorists, this is how they operate. But the important thing is to learn from what is happening and adapt. For instance, we were in the process of saying, do we close all schools along the borders? But then and then disperse the students to other schools. Where you can have where you can have probably adequate security, so to say. But when you look at Kagara is not really at the outskirts. It shares no boundary with any country. It's about 2 hours drive because of the bad road for Mina. Now, of course, but the important thing is that every security in the world must learn to adapt to the changing tactics of terrorists. You've forgotten that a few years ago, hardly a day passed without one suicide bomber blow himself up that we were able to arrest. A few years ago, places of worship were not safe. A few years ago, Boko Haram was in virtually 10 states operating daily. A few years ago, Boko Haram would stroll into Abuja, go to the force headquarters, bomb them, go to United Nations headquarters, kill people, go to the motor park, explode bombs, go to media headquarters. But all that has been contained now. So we will continue to adapt to meet the challenges. You can see now that school children is now their focus, because that's, you see, when children are kidnapped, parents, everybody is very worried. And they do that deliberately. It's deliberately, that they know what they are doing when they target children. But at the same time, we can't have soldiers in every class. We can't turn our schools to barracks. But we would continue to work effectively to ensure that we checkmate the terrorists.
Since this administration came to power in 2015, this Kagara abduction is the latest. But the previous ones, the government had managed to rescue all those who were kidnapped, get them back, both in the case of Dapchi and in the case of Kankara, and even get some of those who were kidnapped before the government came in Chibok to get released. But there's this sticking point. The lone girl in Dapchi who is still in custody, Leah Sharibu. It was the anniversary of her capture a couple of days ago. And I just wonder, is it that she's part of collateral damage now because she's the only one left?
You see, Ladi, it's very unfortunate that many of our elites, particularly the political leaders, choose to introduce religion into a purely security matter. We must not play to the hands of the terrorists. They want to divide us further. They were deliberate in not releasing her. They were deliberate in not releasing her because they knew that as long as she's held captive, to become a sore point. But the federal government is leaving no stone unturned, even now, through back channeling, to see how Leah Sharibu can be released. And believe me, when you are dealing with security, you don't talk about religion. Don't talk about ethnicity. Our soldiers that are dying daily so that me and you can sleep well, there are Christians among them, there are Muslims among them. And when we have casualties, we don't count them in terms of Christianity or Islam. So we must please be careful and be more responsible in the way we look at issues. This is exactly what the terrorists want to do: set Muslims against Christians. That's why why would they leave out one person out about almost 200 and something, if I remember the number, about 100 and something, 109.
Yes.
Just deliberate on their part, but we will not rest until Leah Sharibu is released.
That example brings to mind the difficulty. It's almost like a catch-22 situation that government finds itself in. When things like this happen, you want to get back all those people, and you want to get them back unharmed and safe.
Absolutely.
Some will point out that the easiest way to do that is to negotiate. But then, as a matter of policy, there are governments that say, we don't negotiate with terrorists, which means that leaves only the forceful option of overpowering them and hopefully securing the release of those who have been kidnapped. In this latest incident and in this time, that matter has reared its head again, because there are those who have gotten involved and who are saying, look, you might be able to deal with these bandits a bit more effectively if you offered them more carrot than stick. An example is Sheikh Gumi, who is talking about a blanket amnesty for some, particularly, for example, in the case of this Niger incident. But there are those who are saying, no, 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 no. Policy is policy. We're not negotiating with anybody. Example, Governor El-Rufai of Kaduna. The federal government, between these two, I don't know whether to call them rocks or hard places, where does the federal government stay?
You see, the immediate concern of federal government now is to get those students released or harmed. In doing so, we'll employ both kinetic and non-kinetic. But non-kinetic doesn't necessarily mean amnesty or ransom. Not necessarily. Now, but you do not outrightly say, oh, we won't do this or we won't do that. But one thing I know the government will not pay ransom. And why will the government not pay ransom? The government will not pay ransom because if you set the precedent of paying ransom, it becomes a business. Every group will now go to any school, collect boss, and they want you to pay ransom. So, and no matter how difficult it is, Nigeria will not surrender sovereignty to any group. I would rather not want to discuss what the strategy is here in respect of this Kagara boys or any others. But I can assure you that while we are ready and willing to employ both non-kinetic and kinetic, at the end of the day, the final decision on what happens lies with the military, security, and of course the commander-in-chief.
You mentioned it earlier on when you talked about the fact that the amount of damage that social media does when situations like this arise is incalculable because it's easy to use.
Yes.
Unlike probably the more traditional media. And you've championed the case of some level of regulation for the social media.
Yes.
Do you, one, feel in any way vindicated by what is happening now? And does this mean that the drive to instill this regulation will continue?
You see, without being immodest, in 2017, I turned an entire National Council on Information meeting to discuss the issue of fake news and disinformation, 2017. So I saw the incredible damage fake news, disinformation will wreak on the country. In Rwanda, it was the radio Libre that was used in the genocide in which Rwandans lost over 800,000 people. So I started campaigning against fake news. In 2018, I started an advocacy. And I even came to channels and other for support. And I said then that the next war will be caused by fake news, disinformation. Now, today, the mix of fake news using social media platform has now become a cancer. That if the world does not take time to destroy the entire world. Unfortunately, there's a lot of insincerity about this matter. Now, and I want to use the local example here. The NSAS protest didn't go awry until when fake news started that 78 people were killed at the toll gate. It was then that the real destruction started. that led to 37 policemen being killed, being murdered in cold blood, 6 soldiers, 55 civilians all over the country, 57 civilians all over the country, hundreds of billions of properties being set on fire, 265 public buildings razed to the ground. It was fake news. Unfortunately, the major players like Twitter and Co were supporting this. But when a similar thing happened in the US, and the then president, using the same fake news to say that election was stolen, and based on that, the Capitol was
stormed.
Then they now called them domestic terrorists. It became a treasonable offense. They immediately, Twitter, Facebook, everybody, removed their platforms from the president. Now, why this double standard? During NSAS, it was a very, you said they had the legitimate right to protest. The federal government said yes, for more than 10, 12 days. But when it was going out of hand, the federal government declared a curfew. Everybody go home. Today, sir, those who participated in the riot at Capitol, they have been pursued, they have been arrested, they have been persecuted. And the Amnesty International has not found its voice. But when Nigeria tries to persecute the hoodlums who are hiding under NSAS, you will see Amnesty International will now be threatening fire and brimstone. So you see, but if we do not take the issue of fake news, social media seriously, it will be at our peril. And so I want to say again, the government is setting up a very high power committee to see how we can make social media more responsible. And I want to say this clearly. Nobody has any intention of stifling the media, no. And our first attempt to regulate the social media, we invited Guild of Editors, we invited NUJ, we invited Twitter, we invited Google, we invited Facebook, we invited all the major schools. Let's sit down together. It's because there's a country called Nigeria that we all practice in our profession. But I can assure you, the program is still very much on. We still want the cooperation of everybody, and I hope this time around there will be more cooperation, because the whole world is now seeing that an unregulated social media is a time bomb waiting to explode.
I went to, a couple of days ago, the chairman of the Governors Forum and then the chairman of the APC committee that took a look at the issue of the structure of the country. They were on a platform and they made a couple of recommendations. And because both of them, of course, are members of government and they are members of the ruling party, but I mean, you are the spokesperson of government, so it would be nice to ask you if that is indeed the position, or the government will be taking that position. They talked about the fact that there will need to be community policing. Now, there will be need to possibly arm the security forces a bit more, give them the technology, the weaponry, and probably make the numbers available more, amongst other things. But this is happening at a time when the country is also battling COVID, which is also taking a lot of resources away. So I'm wondering, what's the thinking here, particularly because these are people who are in government, who are very senior members of government, and one is wondering, how is this going to happen, if indeed it is going to happen? The issue of community policing, for example, it's been withheld because of the fear of abuses. Have we overcome that fear now to be able to push ahead with it, do you think?
No, I think the difference between state policing and community policing. Federal government endorses community policing and is trying it, practicing it, using some states for trial. Community policing is different from state policing. State policing is what state policing, the advocates of state policing, is that let the states have their own police. There will decentralize policing. There will be no one IGP. Each will have his own IGP. I mean, that's kind of thinking. As opposed to what the federal government is doing. That, look, community policing is the answer because you need community participation to be able to secure, the country. But clearly, you must see a difference between me and the party chairman and the governor. One is the head of his sub-nation. The other is chairman of a party. I'm spokesperson of federal government. But what I can tell you is that the federal government has always put security on top priority. And over the years has done so much to ensure that adequate platforms, weapons, welfare, condition of service for the security, apparatus is available. And we'll continue to do that. It's tough, like rightly said, balancing the need of the security on one hand and fighting COVID on the other hand, especially during the pandemic, which has slowed down the economy. But the good thing, and I must say, is that despite the situation we have today, we still managed to get off recession because of the deft management of the economy by Mr. President. So we'll continue juggling the balls, but clearly security trumps every other thing when it comes to governance.
It was revealed by, I believe it was the Chief of Defense Staff, the outgone Chief of Defense Staff, that he commissioned a study about forests. But because it has become obvious that a lot of the problems we have with bandits, kidnappers, and so on are emanating from the large expanse of forests that we have in different parts of the country. And that he commissioned a study, and that when the result came, he shared this particularly with many of the sub-national heads that at the level of the states, governors in particular, and then at the level of the federal government. But that very little action was taken, particularly by the governors who are in custody of most of this land where the forests are. Is the federal government thinking of a policy now of, as some have said, clearing many of those forests, or of working in consultation with the states to determine what happens in those areas, particularly because they've now been identified as hideouts for some of these less than desirable elements of the society?
I think the better approach would be to work with the various state governments to secure those forests, make them safe for everybody. Because even if you look at the issue of climate change we are talking about, or conservation, to not help our cause to just destroy them, because if you destroy them, it's going to affect the ecosystem. But I think what is needed is better consultations between the sub-national governments, the federal government, and the security on how best to secure those forests. Clearly, those forests, many of them are used as hideouts. And I think with technology today too, and when all of our platforms are delivered, it will no longer be business as usual, and even those bandits and those criminals will find out that those forests will not save them. But again, it needs the collaborative effort of all the parties.
I can only wish you the very best, Minister, as we navigate through this challenging period.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. It's been very exciting exchanging views with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Newsnight today. Thanks for watching. Do let us know what you think of the issues raised during this conversation. Our feedback mechanisms are on your screen. You can also listen to this and previous episodes of the program by visiting our website, channelstv.com/podcast. I am Ladi Akeridoluale. Goodbye.